welcome to our meetup event tonight, which is we're going to talk about sexual wellness. Woo-hoo! Woo-hoo! Before I get into getting into the nitty-gritty of sexual wellness, I want to talk a little bit about me and what I do and why I do what I do. So I'm a sexual wellness coach. I've been doing this work full-time for the last 5 years and part-time since I've been 15 years old, and I'm 40 now. So it's always been a part of my life, and people always ask me, like, how did you end up doing this job, And it picked me. I never decided when I was a little girl, when I grow up, I'm going to talk about sex. When I was 15, my mother had taken me to a women's gathering. And in this women's gathering, I was sitting by myself, and this woman walked into the room, and she was in her late 60s, early 70s, and she just blurts out crying, "I've never had an orgasm." Now, a typical 15-year-old girl would be like, "Why are you telling me this?" But I wasn't. I was like, that is the saddest thing I'd ever heard. So I got up, I hugged her, proceeded to teach her about that it wasn't too late to masturbate and to orgasm, and that changed my life. After that moment, I couldn't go anywhere without people talking to me about sex. I get into a cab driver start talking about his sex issues with his wife. I would be sitting at the bus stop, and the person beside me would start talking to me about sex. My friends started giving out my phone number to random people. I'd pick up the phone, people would ask me random sex questions. So 5 years ago, I'm like, okay, clearly this is what I'm meant to do, and this is what I ended up doing full time. I have lots of education in this area of healing, tantra, working with abused women and children, and of course my own journey of healing my own sexual trauma and sexual abuse. So my ideal place is to create the world to be safer, that sex to be safe, that sexuality is a normal part of our expression, our everyday expression, that it's just as normal and as important as our mind, body, and spirit. And so that's basically fundamentally why I do what I do. Any questions so far?
What's Tantra mean?
Okay. So we're going to get into that when we go over the 5 aspects of sexual wellness. The last one is the sacred, and so we'll talk more about Tantra in that component. Now, before we go on this adventure together, I want to create a safe space. So the first thing I want to do is I want to say to every one of you, this is a safe and non-judgmental space. That everything that you say here stays here. And everything that you say, any questions that you may have, there is no judgment. So I want you to turn to somebody and say, this is a safe and non-judgmental space.
This is a safe and non-judgmental space.
And this is a safe, non-judgmental space.
Okay, this is a safe and non-judgmental space.
Thank you.
Very good. Well done. The next thing I want to talk about is giving you permission to be horny.
Do I need permission?
One of the biggest problems with sexual arousal is we treat it in our culture like it is a disease.
Right,
Like, you're like, oh my God, I'm so horny, I'm going to die if I don't fix it, right?
Yeah.
We don't embrace it. We don't sit with it in a respectful way. Not only that, but we also assume that somebody else is responsible to do something with our sexual arousal. So a lot of times we won't allow ourselves to feel pleasure throughout the day because we don't want somebody else to think that they're obligated to fix it. So ultimately, my goal is that one day I'll be able to walk up to someone and someone will say, hey, I'll say, hey, how are you doing? And they're going to say, I'm horny. And I'm going to be like, congratulations, have a nice day. When that happens, you guys don't need me anymore. Right? So, in light of that, and in support of that, I give you all permission to be horny.
You know what's ironic about what you just said? I just had this flashback to end of high school, university days. We said that all the time. We were open about that.
Nice.
And mind you, that's a long time ago.
Very nice.
But we did converse like that.
That's
openly.
that's
Men,
wonderful.
women, or young men, young women.
That's wonderful. Because that's not
No,
not
it's
Maybe
not
guys,
accepted.
maybe guys more than the women.
No, but even like, keep in mind the time frame was long ago. So we wouldn't have thought anything about that. There was nothing, men and women didn't think anything wrong with saying that.
But now that's
Now
not,
it wouldn't be the case.
that wouldn't be the case at all, culturally.
Especially at work.
Yeah.
Oh, you will know.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Do you have that report? Yes. I'm sorry I couldn't get it done because I was incredibly horny.
Yeah.
I was busy.
You're gonna have signs going up.
And I was doing something about it.
Yeah.
So I couldn't do the report.
So now what I want you to do is give each other permission to be horny.
Okay.
Okay, you got permission to be horny.
Well, okay, I'll accept that. And my friend over here, you have permission to be horny.
Thank you. So do you. So do
Yeah,
you.
okay.
I give you permission to be horny.
Thank you.
No one ever gives me permission when I ask them.
You can have permission.
You can have it.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you.
Yes,
It's
you
a
can have. it.
unanimous call for me.
Woo!
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you about what is sexual wellness. For me, sexual wellness is, after working with so many clients, there all seemed to be like a theme when we were struggling, people were struggling with their sexuality. And I started to see this 5 aspects starting to emerge. And the first one was play. Because if you don't feel safe, if you don't play, it's because you don't feel safe. If you don't feel safe, you can't play. And ultimately, sexual expression is adult play. It's how we progress from being playful as children and risking and exploring as teenagers, and then adulthood is about the sexual play of life. And so play became the first aspect that I end up spending a lot of time working with clients in because I do a lot of work with sexual abuse trauma, and so people don't feel safe. And that's part of what this is about, making sex safe. We need to play. The second aspect, and we're going to go into more details about each aspect, but the second aspect is sensuality. And sensuality is about being in your body, being in your senses. So many times, and especially culturally, how we move in the world with technology, we're go, 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 go. We're in our brains all the time. We're never in our bodies. And so how are we supposed to feel sexual arousal and express sexual arousal if we haven't been in our body? So it's like going from 0 to 60 in seconds, but you can't do that if you're not in your body, right? So a lot of the work in the sensuality component is about coming back into your body, surrendering to pleasure. And when I say pleasure, I don't mean orgasmic pleasure. I mean just pleasure. That when the sun is on your skin, when the wind blows on your skin, when you eat something absolutely delicious and divine and you're like, when you see a beautiful sunset that brings almost tears to your eyes, it's about life's pleasure all around us. And if we don't spend any time there, then there's no way we're getting to the orgasmic pleasure and surrendering to that. Questions? You look like you have a question.
No, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, right. So that's a bigger part of it, is that, sexual wellness is not just about having sex. Like when I talk about sexuality, I don't mean just about the act of sex. I'm talking about who you are as a sexual being. And who we are as sexual beings affect every area of our lives. Our ability to be present, our ability to have intimacy, our ability to connect to people, not just our lovers, but people in our lives. Our creativity, our energy levels, our abilities to be physically healthy. All of these things are affected by who we are as a sexual person. And if that has been shut down, as many of us it has, then it will affect all of these other areas. So that was the second aspect. The third aspect is sexuality. And in that aspect, we're going to explore surrendering to orgasmic pleasure, which is really, for women, the only reason we have orgasms is if we surrender to the pleasure. And when we surrender to the pleasure, our body's byproduct is orgasms. For men, you've been taught for so long to deny the pleasure in the body in the moment during sex. that it's like the orgasm, the mastery of ejaculation. You know, it's been a denial of the sensations, like, oh, I think of my grandmother, right, in that moment, and not being present in the pleasure of the possibilities when you're with your lover, or even when you're with yourself. So it's about surrendering. Sexuality is about surrendering to pleasure. And as you surrender to pleasure, more pleasure can happen. And then you surrender that pleasure, and more pleasure can happen. But the word surrender is hard. That means you're letting go of control. And not very many people are really comfortable with the idea of letting go of control. Which is why the play, which is the safety part, is so important. Because if you feel safe, you can surrender control. Okay? Any questions so far? No? All right. The fourth aspect, which is actually my favorite aspect, which is the exploration. This is where you get into all the fun that sexuality can bring to your life. This is where, you know, we start talking about, you know, kinky stuff and BDSM and, you know, alternative sexual practices like swinging and non-monogamy and all the possibilities. Because this means that if you're at this, when you're at this aspect, this means that you're able to surrender not only to pleasure, you're able to surrender to your desires. Because our fundamental desires are wild. Deep down inside, all of us have wild, wild fantasies, wild, wild desires. And the only reason that we don't embrace them is because we don't feel safe to embrace them. We're told that they're taboo. We're told that they're wrong. We're told to feel shameful of them. We may have risked at one point, and then our partner freaked out, and we were like, okay, I'm never doing that again, right? So, you know, it's really important that that's the important part of it's the part that we develop, our sexual development starts to create, keeps going. From the basics, you know, the basics of just like, pleasure, yay, orgasm, yay, to, okay, who am I as a sexual being? What are my desires, and where do I want to explore, and how do I want to keep growing as a sexual person? Because that's what I love about sex. You can have sex often and for years and years and years and years, and you never master it. You can get really good at it, but there's always something to explore. And if you look at sex and sexuality that way, you will never be bored with sex. You will never have a mundane sex life with your partners because it's always developing all the time. There's things in my life that when I was, say, 10 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, there's no way I would do that. And now it's like, yeah, right? Because that's our natural flow of development, sexual development. Any questions about that?
This is great because it reinforces so many things. Like it couldn't have been better stated.
Awesome.
From my perception anyway.
Good. Anybody else so far have any?
Good, it's all good, it's all true, I totally get where you're coming from.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Right on. Okay. Then the last aspect is the sacred aspect. And this is where, when I talk about sacred sexuality, I'm talking about how you can reach higher states of awareness, connection to God, divine, whatever higher being that you support or connect to. Even if you don't have a practice of something higher outside of yourself, you can connect divinely with a partner and yourself. And the idea is that you're using your sexual energy to be in the body, and being in the body is what brings you closer to God or divine or whatever you want to call it. So a lot of and it's a spiritual practice. There's Taoism, which is the Oriental version of sacred sexual practices. There's Tantra, which is the Indian, from India version of sacred sexual practices. There's lots of different tribes throughout the world that practice sacred sexual practices, sex magic, all these things. It's harnessing the life force energy that happens with sexuality to manifest, to heal, to create, to see visions, all sorts of wonderful things. But in order to achieve that, that's a lifetime practice. It's not like, oh, I went to a Tantra class and now I'm seeing God. Right? It's like, it's a practice. It's about learning about your body. It's about being present. It's about being human. All that it means to be human. Not to deny human. To not deny, because a lot of spiritual practices, to reach those states of higher consciousness, there's a concept of we deny the body, we deny the senses, we deny all the human flaws, where with sacred sexual practices is about we embrace those and we are fully and completely in them. But we don't stay stuck in them, so you're always moving through them, right? A Tantra philosophy that I love is that, you know, you feel everything in the world and in life, but for only 30-second intervals. Which means, in this moment, I feel this. The next moment, I'm embracing whatever the next feeling, the sensation is. Which means that I'm present. It means I'm here. It means I'm with you in this moment. And that also means the whole gamut of the human expression. It's not just all happy, happy, joy, joy, orgasms, but it's about, you know, it's about grieving and sadness and anger and all the whole gamut.